Great. Thank you very much for being here. I just wanted to give you some initial comments. At some point in time, you'll hear from us in greater detail about our impressions of the budget. But I can say without any doubt that this is one of the most disastrous budget presentations I've ever listened to. It has failed on every standard. We came in with hopes that the minister would have addressed the key issues of concern to people, and he has failed on every one of those parameters. Issues surrounding the jobs, welfare, the framework for growth and development, clarity about the government's vision in different areas, big picture issues about where the country is going. We had hoped that all of these would be part of the budget presentation this afternoon. I know many of my colleagues and people across the country had low expectations. I said to them, let's give them a chance, but they have just fulfilled that view, that they have lived up to the low expectations people had of the government. So what we saw was a lot of details. The Minister of Finance seemed to have, in his presentation, taken from almost every single ministry their routine work program and read their work programs out to the nation. Things that are day-to-day work that you don't even focus on in a budget presentation were elevated in the National Assembly to plans. So we heard about 6 duplexes being built last year. We heard about 360 titles issued when 10,000 used to be issued in a single year under the PPP, when thousands of houses were built in a single year. We heard about 6 houses. We hear about 100 families to benefit from some drainage project that they were doing. This sort of detail, which buildings would be painted this year, that they were buying wheelchairs for some people at the Palms. This sort of thing is not what it takes to inspire a country to produce, to expand welfare, to generate jobs. And so on all of those counts, we have seen an utter abysmal failure on the part of the Minister of Finance and the government of Guyana. Right at the beginning, the minister made reference to their manifesto about a few things, what their promises of the good life that they had mentioned in the manifesto, but he ignored all the other promises that were being made in the manifesto that they have routinely not fulfilled. And I can enumerate those promises. The promises about thousands of jobs, the promises to the old age pensioners about doubling their old age pension. Now, what we have seen now in this year's and next year, our pensioners will get a $500 increase on their pension, which will be just over 2% on the pension that they are receiving now. And this is the kind what we saw in the budget. I'm not going to go through the things that he listed as their success stories in the past a few years about the reduction of the marginal rate of income tax, when he ignored the elephant in the room, which was 200 new tax measures and fees increases. So let us look at what the minister confirmed. First of all, the minister confirmed in the budget presentation that our growth rate for 2017 is lower than even the revised year rate at mid-year. So they established a target at budget time for 2017. At mid-year, they revised the target downwards, and we did not even achieve the revised target. That's the first lesson from the minister's budget. The second one, and it confirms what we've been saying, that this confirms what we've been saying, that the economy is not performing. Secondly, they collected $8.2 billion more taxes in 2017 than in 2016. We've been saying that this government is taking more taxes out of people's pockets while arguing that they were too heavily taxed under the PPP. Thirdly, we have confirmed that at least $10 billion have been transferred from the statutory agencies into the Treasury. Fourthly, that there was a massive deterioration in the current account of the balance of payment, over $200 million US. And the current account of our balance of payments tells you about economic activities in the country, because it's the difference between your exports and your imports. It tells the picture of your trade with the rest of the world. Now, the marginal increase in the capital account also came about because of the inflows from oil proceeds, from ExxonMobil investment, and from the disbursement on loan. But the massive deterioration in the current account of the balance of payment tells a picture by itself. Fifthly, we've learned from the Minister of Finance that our debts have gone up and are going up. Next year, the debts will increase. Sixthly, we learned from the Minister of Finance that next year they will undertake a comprehensive exercise across the country to do the valuation of land to increase taxes. So although he said there are no new taxes in the budget, they are introducing a measure now that, now having exhausted the tax measures at the national level, they're now taking this to their NDCs and to the municipalities across the country. So in every NDC and every municipality now, they're going to push those councillors and their leadership there to increase taxes. So we have learned that too from this government. So several things: lower growth, more taxes, massive transfers from the statutory agencies, deteriorating balance of payment, debts are going to go up, they're coming now to tax you more at the local levels. Basic lessons. Then we saw the old narratives emerging again. So we're still working on many, many plans. The first plan we're working on now is the GSDS. And this would allow us to transition to renewable energy. There are several pillars, 7 pillars, and there is a governance pillar. We've heard this before, many, many times. So how is it that you are working on this plan? And currently, your approach to the energy pillar of the plan is one that works contrary to the stated objective of the overall plan, which is sustainable use of energy and a green economy. That is precisely one of the things that's happening now. Is the mere fact that the minister said the hydro and he gave some reasons that can't stand up to rigorous analysis, but the Amila Fall is not going forward. We're going forward with Maka Maka now, which would just supply Letem with 0.5 megawatt of power, no base load hydropower station, and that they're continuing to pursue 50 megawatts of power coming from natural gas, that will violate the objective of this plan, which is to have 100% of our energy come from renewable sources by 2025. And he sees nothing wrong with it. It speaks about a governance pillar in this GSDS. And the farms that they're talking about, the solar farms at Mabaruma, that they put money in the budget, nearly $1 billion in 2017's budget, that plus the other solar initiatives that are undertaken have all been done without any transparency. They have procured those systems without any form of public tendering. What sort of governance system are you talking about? And so we got that, the GSDS, and the same narrative again. Then we got a lecture on the oil industry and how we must spend our resources wisely. But we are not going to get the sovereign wealth fund in the form of a legislation before us soon. We're going to get a paper to discuss some of the initiatives, and ideas that we want in the legislation. They can easily draft the legislation now and bring it before us. This was a promise made 2.5 years ago to get it done. But this is basically delaying tactic. I think they do not want the sovereign wealth fund in place because the sovereign wealth fund will restrict their ability to waste and to use the resources wantonly in a manner that they have been using public resources in now. And so that is why there is a delay in the sovereign wealth fund. And so those are the key issues. The key issues about whether they will go out, now that Jordan admitted that the basin has been de-risked, whether they will auction future blocks. Should have said something about that. Should have said something about transparency in the sector, whether they will release the contract now to the public. But all we heard about the whole budget speech is how we must use our resources from oil and gas wisely. We've heard that before. They didn't tackle the real issues. On constitutional reform, platitudes again. Platitudes, nothing specific. He says better debt management, we're going to manage debt better, but they're not transparent when we even ask about the ways they're accumulating debt. They're not transparent about it. The key thing about better management of any system comes with greater transparency. He spoke about local government elections. Again, platitude. A number of things. Internationalize SDGs in the budget. What does that mean? Not incarcerate kids for small offenses. We started working on those projects. Better governance. So, better governance in financial management and the public sector investment program and public procurement. And frankly speaking, the worst period in our history, maybe modern history, in terms of transparency in the use of public funds, is now the worst period. I can list all of the projects. We've been at this so often that I don't have to do this again. The same bridge, the bridge that they're talking about, the bond, the Durban Park, so many buildings, a fence, the parks that they're building, the presidential parks, the solar panel, all of these, the $1 billion that they can't account for in the Ministry of Health that they use to procure drugs. What about transparency in those matters? So he didn't address those. He went through the list about how they will debar contractors. Well, it's not many of the contractors, it's the corrupt officials and ministers who should be debarred. Not many of the contractors in this case. Would they have a list, a legislation to debar ministers maybe? And they're going to do a register of procurement evaluators. Once they do that register, it would even be worse. We had a system where people selected randomly. Now, once you do a list system like that, then they will be subjected to inducements or harassment. Once that list becomes public, who the evaluators are. And putting in place an e-procurement platform does not mean anything if the bidding process itself is corrupt. If you annul tenders routinely because your preferred bidders don't win the contract, which is what they've been doing. So it doesn't matter whether you do all of these things. And you know, a treasury single account. All of these are routine things that people normally do in the Ministry of Finance. Jordan spends a lot of time focusing on this, on surveys that they're going to do. I don't want to go through all of these. The tax administration reform that he speaks about, the 5-year strategic plan, they're working on that now. And, but if you hear him carefully, it is about collecting more revenue. Now, tax administration is part of fiscal policy. And around the world, people know that you can use fiscal policy to stimulate economic activities or enhance welfare. Where are those two elements of the tax administration reform they're pursuing? His single-minded goal, and that seems to be the goal of this government, is just to collect more tax revenue. And he has made it clear as part of their tax administration reform program to maximize government revenue. And then he goes on to list, we have outposts in marijuana, Charity, Parika, Iterbang. We're going to put some stamp on alcohol. Lots of those people out there, we virtually had enjoyed a tax-free zone under the PPP. Beyond Kurupukari and beyond the Pomeroon, we practically allowed residents who live in those communities, in the hinterland communities, to enjoy a kind of tax-free access to items that they use because of the high cost of living in the hinterland. They're reversing this policy now, so it's bringing greater burdens on people, and it is not enhancing revenue significantly. So the financial sector reform, again, it's the same thing. He read out the work program of the central bank. So he read out the work program of the accountant general. He read out the work program, which is all of these things. He read out the work program of the GRA, ASICUDA, everything else, tax administration. Then he shifted over to the work program of the central bank. So working on deposit insurance scheme, a strategy for payment system that would help. We're training more supervisors for the system on the Bank of Guyana for the evaluation of bank. We're working on a guidelines now for a stress test. Imagine that. The Minister of Finance tells us in the budget we're working on guidelines for a stress test. Yeah, that's normal. That's routine work in these institutions. Then he moves on to tell us about capital market development. And notice this has to be done, the amendment of the securities legislation would have to be done in consultation with the sector. You're trying to develop the capital market, not regulate it out of existence. You're trying to develop the capital market so you can broaden the financial tools available to your businesses so they can drive down costs of their production. Because now it's heavily dominated, their cost of financing, by loans. So that's the purpose, the development of the capital markets. So he has made this about, he told us about the elements of the new act that they're rewriting, And all of the elements seem to be more punitive measures against the industry. They will not go redound to the development of capital markets in Guyana. In fact, they would lead to its retardation, or the retardation of capital markets. So again, he misses the bus on this issue too. And then I thought that there'd be a massive program for business development. So we heard the minister switched over to business, and he said they have a 100 million revolving fund, and he told us, he listed how many people got support from the ministry grant. And that's, by the way, that's an old PPP program, the one we left, the funded program. So he talks about 4 other business registration hubs in addition to the ones that they have already established. And again, these business registration hubs don't help small businesses. You bring another layer of bureaucracy to them. Small businesses are helped through the lowering of the cost of capital, through government assisting them directly through maybe expertise. So if they need to redesign a production process, if they're producing furniture, you can help them with the outside input to better quality furniture, etc. Not by setting up business registration hubs so that these small businesses now have to pop over there and fill up forms at your business registration. It is the same approach to business development like they had with the capital markets. More regulations. Regulations don't allow the growth of small businesses. So the approach again here was small. And then the biggest job creation initiative in the budget was, he said, Go Invest is expecting to bring in $154 billion of new investments next year. Didn't say which sector. It's like the same time. A couple of years ago, they said $180 billion of investment was facilitated by Go Invest, and I asked, in which sector? And they had 10,000 jobs. And I asked, which sector? And I asked the same question again now. Which sector will it be in? Because they lied then, and this is not true. That's about 750 million US dollars of investments. In what sector? Even with oil and gas. Even with the oil and gas sector, then they can't reach that figure. 750 million US dollars of investment next year. So that's fictitious, and if it is fictitious, then it's likely that the 5,000 jobs that they are projecting to create next year is also fictitious. So we'll be pressing them a little bit more on these. Export competitiveness, again, they'll be working on standards and a strategy. So standards and a strategy, not about getting the cost of production down so you can be more competitive, but standards and a strategy. It's the same thing, the same approach. So the minister spoke about ICT and a strategy again to be finalized in 2018. Notice they're setting aside money for strategies, just strategies, not real work. So they're upgrading the LTE system that we left in place, and the money is going to come, the 2.3 billion, from a new loan from Huawei, for Huawei to upgrade the system. But what about the tax? If you so love this sector, why not remove the tax on data? The value-added tax that you put last year on data, that is so critical to the future of the industry, that is the ICT industry. Without cheap data, you can't develop the sector. And he did nothing in that regard. Here again, we heard from that they just joined the EITI, and that that they will be moving for. I'm just trying to move off quickly. We heard in the mining sector there will be progress this year. 250 jobs at Bonastica will be created, 50 million new investment in a bauxite plant. And guess what? Before I left office in 2011, I worked on this project. We signed up the agreement to this project. And then the manganese mine that may create the 300-400 jobs too in Region 1. Guess what? Again, before I left, I remember visiting, and we worked on that agreement too. So it's all old projects now coming forward, now bearing fruit, because it takes time sometimes to get these things going. The infrastructure for integration, again, they went back to these things. So the minister, 2.2 billion for Sheriff Street Road. But let me tell you that we had a 66 million US loan we had from the IDB to do the Sheriff Street and several other roads. I explained this before. From Diamond to the airport should have been upgraded because we had already built the 4-lane up to Diamond. That's just completing now. So the East Bank Berbice from New Amsterdam all the way to Mara, we're supposed to upgrade that road. Canals 1 and 2. That was some of the money was in this loan for those projects. So they've decided to leave some for Sheriff Street from the old project, go ahead with it, and reformulate the loan now, and to move it into building houses, but we're going to come to that in a moment. So what will happen to those projects? Just this morning I came in from the airport, and if you look at this section beyond Diamond now, it's deteriorating. So the money that was secured there for that has now been shifted out. But this Sheriff Street project is an old project. The East Coast Demerara project, we started using our own funds before I even left office, and then it continued. And the West Coast Road, another project from the PPP. Last year, we said it clearly when he announced the Mabura Road. We made it clear that the British, you're going to have to do a feasibility study. They created the impression they were starting construction this year. Now the study has not even started. So this will take about a year to do this study. And only if it is feasible, and I doubt whether they can meet the threshold of feasibility for it to be funded under the British program, then it will be funded. Similarly, the Kurupukari Bridge, which is part of that same project. So when he mentioned all of these things here, it's old projects or projects that are half-baked, still in the oven, but creates the impression that they are going to bring great developments for people there. And then he talks about hubs along the roadway and the World Bank. That would raise a lot of worries with people, because this is precisely why the international agencies did not want to fund a road of this nature to Lethem. They said it will destroy the forest. So now that will create a whole range of new environmental concerns for people there. We're saying the same thing. The airport project continues to be a tragedy. I came in this morning, and even if they have to spend a bit more money, but they can't do that to this country. This country needs an airport that will look to the future. It's just something that is so unbelievable that you will reduce the air bridges, the square footage of the airport, to 2 now from 8. And we have 4 aircraft standing on the tarmac now, waiting, and maybe another one just on the taxiway. And you're going to have 2 air bridges to service them, when we had 8 in the original design, a bigger airport, and it shouldn't have cost us a cent more. They've just reformulated this project, and now we're going to have an airport that we'll have to go back to all the time. we were building this airport for way into the future. But they take credit for it, and now it's gone. As you know, the Komu and Makamako will not replace any of those issues. Then the affordable housing. I don't want to go through this, but I mentioned already the reformulated loan. Some of it will go into housing, but we're not even sure about this as yet, and we have some major concerns about how the resources would be used. Could be used in a very political fashion. They mentioned the 3 new water treatment plants, and those are from a loan that the PPP left in office, when he left office. It was interesting to see what the minister had to say about agricultural diversification. You know, again, the platitudes. We'll work at the intermediate and Rupunoni savannas. We've been saying that for a while. The only major investment we had there came about under the PVP with Kiffin Simpson and in that area, that they're going to do agro-processing, but no specifics about how it will be done, no incentives for it, and that the SPU will guide the divestment of sugar, but also will reconfigure the remaining estates. So now no longer the board, but the SPU, the Special Purposes Unit, will reconfigure the remaining units. And that Gaisuco is an old, antiquated, the sugar industry is old, antiquated corporation and needs to be gotten rid of. If we had taken that approach to the bauxite industry when Mr. Hoyt brought in Minpok to close it, and we took office in 1992, there wouldn't have been any bauxite production in Linden, because we stopped it. We stopped the closure, and we put in tons of money to keep the community alive. We diversified the villages, the activities there. We built a call center, a road into West Watuka to generate new activities, a business hub, a small loan scheme. We rehabilitate the hospital, the roads in the area a ton. We established new housing schemes to create alternatives to people, and still kept the bauxite industry, the mines open in Linden. And then we managed to privatize them. And so this is the approach. An industry that about 100,000 of our people depend on, and that's already wreaking havoc on your balance of payment. Now we are seeing the sector, how impactful it is. Yes, how impactful it is in on everything else. Then this is your approach to it, short-sighted, the approach to the sugar industry. And we heard about the rice industry again. Nothing much. It's just we're working on upgrading some of the seed. No help for the rice industry, but the rice industry has sustained basically the growth rate and will be driving the growth rate in Guyana in the future. Safeguarding public security, dominated again by small initiatives, and the biggest initiative they have going for them, it continues to be the Citizen Security Program that the PPP left in office, that loan. That's the biggest thing going for it, but no clear vision. Imagine if you're sitting in your home and you're listening how this budget would help you to feel safer. Listening to the Minister of Finance about what initiatives they'd be working on. Just imagine your impression, what you would feel after listening to him. Nothing. There's nothing that gives people greater confidence that the real issues will be tackled. It's just a couple more on prisons. We're spending lots more. They're building nicer a couple more prisons, and they're going to be corrupt just like anything else. Youth empowerment, you know what they did? They took all the programs that were there already and just put them together. So it's 1.7 billion for youth empowerment. It sounds like a lot of money. But when you look at, he started disaggregating. some of the elements, and many of these programs I recognize. They've been there before or been replaced. So it's here, and now we had a program that was significantly larger than that one. So when you go behind the real initiatives now, this will be 150 young people will be taken to some place to be trained, and that they believe can help with youth issues and youth empowerment when they're losing thousands and thousands of jobs. So I can go on. You will see next year's projections. I've looked at them broadly, and one thing that strikes me is that the revenue keeps growing faster than nominal GDP, because you see the GDP rate, and if you look at the inflation together, that the revenue far outstrips the growth in nominal GDP. And that means you're collecting a bigger share all the time of the economy in taxes. And that is not good. That's not good. And there will be, and then it's forecasted for next year that the current account deficit of the balance of payment will widen. Although it deteriorates it significantly this year, it will widen next year. And just imagine the pressures that will put on our foreign currency holdings. Because if our exports are less than our imports, then it has to be financed elsewhere. And on the capital account, that will not finance the demand for currency for merchandise imports. So this is very worrying in the future, but I guess in the debates more of this will come out. On the measures themselves, pathetic. Pathetic is the single word that I can use to describe the measures the Minister of Finance. Pathetic. And that's putting it mildly. There's nothing here that inspires. Nothing that says to the private sector, we're working as your partner. If you work harder, you will get support from the government. There's nothing to say to any group of Guyanese, whether you're a young person, whether you're a pensioner, you're a child going to school, you're a farmer or a bauxite worker, or anyone working in retail trade, the public servant, that I have a better year to look forward to based on this budget. There's absolutely nothing in it. So tinkering around hybrid and electric vehicles, and where we're gassing them up. Now gas vehicles, gas-powered vehicles, we're going to go to that now. The tanks, I guess you'll get the tanks of natural gas and lug them around. And then the $500 increase for the pensioners, the restriction of pine wood, so that will drive up costs a bit, because often the pine wood is cheaper than the products that you can get here. And so that will drive up cost a bit. Nothing else. Exemption of VAT on the logs and some other products. That is what was put in place. The VAT was put in place on those items last year. So it's just a reversal of the policies that they put in place last year that the industry never had. But that alone can't help. That alone can't help. So it's a reversal, backtracking there, nothing much for gold. Now the gold mining sector, he says $64 million of taxes were given up for personal vehicles and $188 million for fuel exemptions. And really, one big company could use up most of those allowances. So I question him how many small miners actually got this benefit this year in 2017, well, 2017. And now, after we made it clear that the day after we get back in office, we'll reverse the tributers tax. We said we'll reverse all of these. They're forced to now reverse it, backpedal, and go back and reverse the tributers tax from from 20% to 10%. You have to admit that it was harmful. Last year they were touting it. The same Simona Brooms stood up and spoke glowingly about this tributary tax, about how miners supported it. If the miners supported it, why are they reversing it now? We said it was wrong from the beginning. And secondly, that now they did the 2% final tax. They made it only an advance tax to a normal corporate payment. They had to backpedal on that too. They had to backpedal and reverse it, but reversed it in a manner that that indexes it to the price of gold. But they had to backpedal, and it was only because of pressures that we managed to get this done, to get it reversed. Significant pressure by us calling on them to do this. But they didn't reverse the value-added tax on excavators or tractors or combines. So you still have, if you're mining, to do that. You have to pay the VAT on those things. So still the mining sector is in a bad shape. Now, I saw they're going to exempt VAT on a housing up to 6. So if you build a whole unit.
If the government builds.
Yes, the government builds it. I'm not sure as yet because I've not read. I'm going based on all of this is based on what I've been hearing. So you will up to 6.5 million, you don't pay the VAT. But they put the value added tax on sand, stone, cement, all building materials last year. So what about you're not government and you're building over 6.5 million or you're buying a house, then you still have to pay the VAT on housing. Doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And this thing about reducing vehicles prices from the tax from 110% to 0, the excise tax, and 140% to 0 based on the cylinder capacity of these vehicles. It's for limited group. It's for limited regions. It's for people who have companies that are incorporated at least 5 years, who've been in tourism business for 5 years in those areas.
No startups.
So it's not for startups.
No.
So how would this stimulate more investments in the sector? What it does, it helps the few people who are in those sectors, and they're limited numbers. And I suspect some of them are close to the government too. Close to the government. Very close to the government. So this is now a measure that would help everyone. And of course, if you should zero rate taxes for big vehicles. We had already zero rated it for vehicles that were like 30 seaters or something and above. If they brought it down to 21 seaters, that's fine with us. Zero rating a lot of those items. The reversal of VAT on education, we're happy about it, and it was because of public pressure again. Because of public pressure again.
Only on the services.
Yes, I'm not even clear because he said services, so we have to check it's good. And then this amnesty.
Mm-hmm.
Why now? Why now? Why this year? Why not from the very beginning of their term? Is it that there are few companies that they know of who have large outstanding interests and penalties that would accrue to them, and they're trying to help those companies by giving them 100% write-off on all interests and penalties if they do it in the next few months, and then 50% if it's done before September. Is it that this is a deal in making? Because if people have taxes outstanding and they have interest to pay, then this government likes to believe that it is fair, then the people should pay the interest for the taxes that are outstanding for a while. But why this sudden change of heart? It smacks of personal deals. And you know, until now, we can say this because a deal that could cost the Treasury 400 million US or 80 billion Guyana dollars, until now we can't get answers on it, made by the same GRA with DDL. We can't get answers from Granger, from Jordan, from this parliament. They wouldn't even allow entertain the question. Imagine that. So 400 million US dollars or 80 billion Guyana dollars of lost revenue. And he can't find money to keep Gaisuko going. And it is the hypocrisy of Jordan too, when he says, we have to do data-driven policies. And they don't want to do a feasibility study for the sugar industry, or a social impact assessment study, or a diversification study. But they want data-driven policies, but in that case, we just have to go forward, refusing to generate any data to allow the data to guide them in that regard, because the data will prove that it is more costly to close the sugar industry, what they're doing now, than the transitional subsidy that it would need, based on the multiple roles that sugar plays in the economy. And so these are just some of this is our initial reaction. As I said before, this is a budget that falls way below expectations. It is unimaginative. It is torturous. It dealt with routine matters, elevated routine work programs of ministries into national prominence, and they miss sight of what is important for Guyana. A clear picture of where we are going and supportive policies to take us there. And the key questions that people out there would still be asking would remain unanswered. And the interest groups here, nothing. And so all we are going to get is another study. Women, the children, nothing for them too. Although they said we are doing some studies to show how our child something expenditure, or how much of the budget goes to child-related activities. And, that's a study. When you took away the Because We Care grant, that is a specific way of taking away $1.6 billion away from the children. You don't need a study to tell you that. But they're going to do a study now to tell us how well they're doing in taking care of our children. But they took away money from them. And the pensioners who were, I think, hoping that they would get back some relief on water and electricity, they're disappointed. Nothing. And young people around this country must be wondering, what's there for me? What's there for me? Will I be getting another job? Will there be jobs tomorrow? No. This budget doesn't set the framework